China has achieved a unique feat. With the help of AI, it has built the world's first AI-generated dam.
No one builds like China, and their next megaproject, dams. An AI-assembled plateau dam, a hydro complex that hides a dark matter lab in its tunnels.
China has announced the start of building the world's largest hydropower dam in the Tibetan region.
And a river elevator that lifts 3,000-ton ships like toys. How are these structures cooling themselves, anchoring into fractured rock, and moving gigawatts across a continent, sometimes in ways engineers can't yet explain? Number 9. Baihetan Dam. In the rugged canyons of the Jinping River, China built an arch so powerful it seems to bend the mountains themselves. The Baihetan Dam doesn't just hold back a river, it turns the entire gorge into a living machine of stone, steel, and unstoppable energy. Rising nearly 950 feet, its double-curved wall sweeps gracefully along a 2,300-foot arc, directing the raw force of the river sideways into the granite cliffs. It's a design that lets nature carry part of the load, turning the valley itself into a partner in holding back one of Asia's most powerful rivers. That design demanded near perfection from the very first pour. The dam's thick body had to harden slowly, without cracking under its own heat. To make that happen, engineers developed special low-heat concrete that would cure evenly across the structure. They laid pipes deep inside the lifts to circulate cool water, keeping the temperature steady as layer after layer of concrete climbed toward the sky. Each batch was tested, monitored, and logged, because even a single flaw could leave a scar that might last centuries. The foundation beneath the dam was no ordinary bedrock. Much of it was made of columnar basalt, a volcanic rock that naturally forms in long, hexagonal pillars. Beautiful to look at, but tricky to build on. Once exposed, those pillars can fracture like a stack of glass rods. To stop that from happening, crews spent months reinforcing the canyon walls. They drilled into the basalt, pumped in grout to seal cracks, and tied the layers together with steel anchors. Only when the ground had been stabilized did the first bucket of concrete meet the rock. Construction followed a precise rhythm. In November 2015, engineers diverted the Jincha's raging flow with a cofferdam so the main wall could rise in dry air. The diversion tunnels were later sealed in May 2020, marking the dam's first flood-safe stage. By April 2017, concrete was climbing non-stop in round-the-clock shifts. Under floodlights, workers and cranes moved like clockwork. Pour, cool, check, and lift again, until the arch stood complete. What makes Baihetan truly jaw-dropping is what sits inside it. 16 colossal turbines, each capable of generating 1 gigawatt of electricity. These are the largest hydro units ever built, carved into underground caverns, big enough to swallow skyscrapers. Precision lasers guided every step as technicians aligned steel runners with errors measured in thousandths of an inch. The first 2 turbines began spinning on June 28, 2021. By December 20, 2022, all 16 were online, producing 16,000 megawatts, second only to the 3 Gorges Dam. That power doesn't stop at the canyon rim. From Baihetan, a high-voltage line runs nearly 1,200 miles to China's east coast, carrying 8 gigawatts of clean energy straight to the industrial heartland. The total cost, between 24 and 34 billion US dollars, covered every step of that dream, from taming the river to wiring the nation. Number 8. Wudongde Dam. Wudongde Dam turns one of China's wildest rivers into a masterpiece of precision. Instead of building a bulky wall, engineers shaped the water with a thin, graceful curve of concrete that looks almost impossible for its size. Rising nearly 1,000 feet high, it's one of the tallest arch dams on Earth, and also one of the slimmest. Every inch of it was poured using a special kind of slow-cooling concrete, so the massive wall wouldn't crack as it hardened under the sun and canyon winds. Crews worked day and night, pouring layer after layer about 15 feet thick, weaving cooling pipes and sensors through the concrete to keep the temperature steady. The result is a dam so refined that flood pressure doesn't push straight against it. It bends sideways into the rock walls of the gorge, letting the structure work with nature instead of against it. The dam's strength comes from how perfectly it's anchored. Before a single bucket of concrete was poured, workers carved the canyon walls in stages and filled every natural crack with grout to seal the rock. Then they joined the concrete sections together along twisting seams shaped to match the arch's curve. These seams had to be lined up with millimeter accuracy, One wrong move, and the entire stress pattern would shift. By June 11, 2020, the main body was complete. Within weeks, the first turbines came online, showing that the careful dance between the river diversion, spillways, and underground caverns had worked exactly as planned. Full operation followed in June 2021, marking the end of one of the fastest and most precise dam builds in modern history. Inside the mountain sits the real engine, 12 giant water turbines, each producing about 850 megawatts of power. Together, they push Wudongde's total capacity to more than 10,000 megawatts, enough to supply entire megacities. These massive steel turbines were aligned to tolerances smaller than a human hair, all inside halls carved deep into solid rock. The dam's thin shape might look delicate, but it's packed with strength and smarts. Hidden inside are hundreds of sensors that constantly measure pressure, temperature, and vibration, helping operators track how the structure breathes with the river. The electricity it makes doesn't stop at the canyon walls. Power flows through an advanced transmission line, the first of its kind in southern China, that carries huge blocks of clean energy across nearly 1,000 miles to factories and homes on the coast. It's all one connected system: the dam, the turbines, the converters, and the high-voltage towers stretching across mountains. Building all this took around 120 billion yuan, or about 19 billion US dollars. Number 7. Xiaowan Dam. Perched high in the mountains of Yunnan, China, the Longtan River cuts through one of the deepest canyons on Earth, and right in the middle of it stands a wall of concrete so tall and curved it looks like a bow stretched across stone. Xiaowan Dam rises about 958 feet high and spans nearly 3,000 feet from side to side. Its sweeping double-curved shape was chosen for a reason. Instead of letting the river's power crash straight down the valley, the dam pushes that force sideways into the solid granite cliffs. It's the second tallest arch dam in the world, and every inch of it had to be poured, cooled, and locked into place with precision so perfect that the finished wall acts like a single continuous curve carved by hand. Before they could even start building, crews had to reroute the Longtan River itself. They carved a massive diversion tunnel to carry the current out of the way while the main foundations were poured. In late 2008, the final closure sealed that tunnel, and by early 2009, the first turbines began spinning. When the river's flow was finally tamed, the site changed from a roaring canyon to a silent bowl of still water, a sight that every dam builder calls the miracle moment, when the gauges steady and white water turns calm. Because Xiaowan is so tall, yet so thin, engineers had to manage something invisible but dangerous: heat. As concrete cures, it warms up, and in a structure this huge, that warmth can cause cracks big enough to ruin the dam's strength. So the team used a special low-heat concrete mix, threaded the arch with cooling pipes, and installed hundreds of sensors to track temperature and stress every hour of every day. Inside the dam, a maze of inspection galleries acts like arteries and nerves, carrying grout lines, cooling water, and instrument cables through the body of the wall. Thanks to that system, the arch cured evenly, layer by layer, without tearing itself apart. All that power trapped behind the curve goes somewhere. On the right bank, 6 enormous Francis turbines, each rated at about 700 megawatts, sit deep inside a cavern carved from the mountain. Water drops nearly 823 feet through the penstocks, slamming into the runners with controlled force. Together, the 6 units produce around 4,200 megawatts, enough to power entire provinces. Upstream, the dam created a reservoir that stretches across about 73 square miles at full level. Operators can raise or lower it to smooth out flood seasons and store energy for peak demand. The spillways, gates, and mid-level outlets act like a massive set of valves, letting the dam release water in carefully tuned surges instead of uncontrolled torrents. Even the ground beneath Xiaowan was sculpted for strength. The canyon walls were excavated step by step, the cracks sealed with grout, and the final arch blocks joined by twisting joints that change shape as they rise. Proof that this was as much craftsmanship as engineering. The finished curve is so efficient that the crest can stay relatively thin, yet the pressure still flows cleanly into the canyon shoulders. When the last forms were stripped away and the lake began to rise, the numbers behind it all told the story. The entire project cost about 3.9 billion US dollars at the time. Number 6. Nuozhadu Dam. In one of Yunnan's wildest canyons, where the Longtan River roars through rock and rain, China set out to build a dam that could stand like a mountain, yet move like it was alive. The result is Nuozhadu, a wall of stone and earth that climbs about 858 feet high, one of the largest rock-filled dams on the planet. Unlike concrete walls that act as single solid slabs, this one is built to flex and breathe. Layers of rock and gravel press against a dense clay core that seals the water inside, forming a structure strong enough to hold back a lake containing more than 19 billion acre-feet of water. That's enough to cover entire states. The dam isn't just big, it's powerful. Hidden behind the wall are 9 giant Francis turbines, each producing about 650 megawatts of electricity. Together, they deliver nearly 5,850 megawatts, roughly equal to several large nuclear plants combined. The units came online in stages between 2012 and 2014, gradually transforming the gorge from a remote river valley into one of China's biggest energy engines. The setting was brutal. The gorge is narrow and steep, its rock fractured by time and shaken by earthquakes. Before a single load of fill went in, workers built diversion tunnels to steer the river away and injected grout deep into the ground to seal the cracks. Then they started lifting the dam layer by layer, packing and testing each section until the entire wall behaved as one solid body. The gravel and stone shells act like muscles, leaning into the canyon walls, while the clay heart in the center is the dam's watertight shield. Every lift was measured, cooled, and tracked with sensors that watched how temperature, moisture, and pressure changed as the wall grew. By the time the crest reached its full height, the dam had literally been built grain by grain with surgical precision. Even the way the dam handles floods is unconventional. Instead of carving spillways through the top, engineers built a separate side channel chute into the mountainside, a concrete slide designed to send more than 1 million cubic feet of water per second safely back to the river below. The chute is armored and aerated, so the water doesn't destroy itself or the structure with violent shockwaves and vapor. This innovation later earned Nuozhadu international awards for flood control design and safety under extreme flow. Inside the mountain, the power station feels like an underground cathedral. Crews carved vast chambers to house turbines, transformers, and penstocks that drop nearly 600 feet from the reservoir to the runners. Upstream, the reservoir joins its partner, Xiaowan Dam, to control more than half the active water storage along the entire Mekong system. Together, they smooth the rhythm of floods and droughts across Southeast Asia, a level of hydrologic control no other river in the region has ever seen. All that power has to go somewhere. Nuozhadu connects directly to an ultra-high voltage DC line that runs about 870 miles east to Guangdong, turning raw river energy into steady light for China's coastal cities, with almost no loss along the way. It took more than $9 to $10 billion to bring it all to life. Number 5. Jinping 1 and 2. High in the mountains of Sichuan, China didn't just tame a river, they folded it through stone itself. The Yalong River once carved a 150-kilometer loop through steep gorges. Engineers decided to cut straight through the mountain instead, creating one of the boldest hydro systems ever built. At the head of the bend stands Jinping 1, a soaring double-curved arch dam, rising about 1,000 feet, the tallest of its kind on Earth. Its wall presses into the granite canyon like a bow pulled tight, bending flood pressure sideways into the cliffs instead of pushing straight down the valley. And hidden downstream, Jinping 2 turns geography inside out. 4 enormous head-race tunnels swallow the river, sending it through the mountain for more than 10 miles before dropping it over 1,000 feet into a vast underground powerhouse. Together, they form a single living machine. Arch above, tunnels below, power everywhere. Those tunnels redefined what was humanly possible. Crews worked under nearly 8,300 feet of overburden, with rock pressures reaching almost 15,000 pounds per square inch and groundwater pressing on the linings at over 1,400 pounds per square inch. 2 of the 12-meter-wide bores were driven by giant double-shield tunnel boring machines, each assembled underground using an approach never tried before. The others advanced by the old-fashioned drill and blast method, guided by drainage galleries and a smaller 24-foot tunnel boring machine that tunneled ahead to relieve pressure. But the mountain pushed back. In late 2009, a violent rock burst buried one of the massive machines and killed 7 workers. The disaster forced a total rethink, new microseismic sensors to listen for cracking rock, small pre-blasts to release tension, and upgraded steel supports. Only after those changes did the drives resume and finally break through the far side. Meanwhile, the arch dam above rose layer by layer with the precision of clockwork. Workers carved out the canyon walls step by step, filled any cracks deep inside the rock to stop leaks, and used specially cooled concrete that hardened slowly so it wouldn't crack as the dam took shape. When the reservoir began filling in October 2012, instruments buried deep inside the structure tracked every shift and pressure change as the immense curve settled onto its foundation. By mid-2014, all 6 turbines, each producing 600 megawatts, were running. Jinping 1 alone generates 3,600 megawatts, feeding an underground station carved into the canyon wall. Combine that with Jinping 2's 4,800 megawatts downstream, and the system delivers over 8,400 megawatts, enough to power entire provinces. At the heart of those mountain tunnels lies an unexpected marvel: the China Jinping Underground Laboratory. Buried under nearly 8,000 feet of rock, it's the deepest large research lab on Earth. The thick overburden shields it from cosmic rays so effectively that scientists can study dark matter in near-perfect silence. The lab exists because of the dam. Physicists simply took over the bypass tunnels the hydropower builders had already carved. Altogether, the 2 projects cost about 78 billion yuan, roughly 12 to 13 billion US dollars, covering the dams, tunnels, turbines, and grid connections. Number 4. Shuangjiangkou Dam. High in Sichuan's mountains, where the Dadu River cuts through some of the steepest country in China, a wall of earth and stone is climbing toward the sky. The Shuangjiangkou Dam isn't made of concrete like most giants of its class. It's built from the ground itself. Standing over 1,030 feet tall, it's a mountain reshaped by hand, a core of clay and gravel locked between thick rockfill shells. The outer shells carry the weight, pressing their mass into the canyon, while the clay hard inside seals out even the smallest trickle of water. Stretching more than 2,100 feet across, the dam contains about 1.59 billion cubic feet of compacted fill, each truckload measured, layered, and tested until the structure became a single, seamless body of stone. Thousands of sensors hidden inside the dam record every temperature shift, every bit of settling, and every change in water pressure as the layers rise. Building something this massive in a place like this pushed the limits of endurance. Crews worked in thin mountain air, freezing temperatures, and slopes so steep that equipment had to be anchored by cable. Engineers call it the 6 highs: high altitude, high cold, high dam, high ground stress, high water velocity, and high slopes. To hold the Dadu River back long enough to build, they first diverted it through a series of tunnels, then began carving spillways and outlet structures while the main embankment climbed higher each week. Every joint in the core wall was sealed and resealed against the fractured canyon rock to stop leaks before they could start. And then came the moment of truth. On May 1, 2025, the dam reached its first impoundment stage. As the reservoir filled, the water climbed about 260 feet above the old river, and the sensors inside confirmed what the engineers had hoped. The giant earth wall was holding perfectly, flexing just enough to absorb its own pressure. When it's finished, Shuangjiangkou will overtake Jinping 1 as the tallest dam on Earth, roughly 33 feet taller, and will drive a 2,000-megawatt powerhouse buried inside the mountain. 4 enormous Francis turbines, each rated at 500 megawatts, will turn the river's fall into electricity. The first unit is expected to start generating power by late 2025, with full operation planned before 2027. The price of this vision has climbed with the dam itself, from about 25 billion yuan in 2013, or just over 4 billion US dollars, to roughly 36 billion yuan today, about $5 billion. Number 3. Longtan Dam. In the deep valleys of Guangxi, China, engineers built what looks like a mountain made by hand. The Longtan Dam rises more than 700 feet above the Hongshui River and stretches for almost half a mile across the gorge. It isn't just big, it's one of the greatest examples of how to build something this massive with precision, speed, and control. Unlike traditional dams poured section by section, Longtan was made using roller-compacted concrete, a dry, fast-setting mix that can be layered like asphalt and hardened into stone. Crews worked non-stop, placing each 12-inch layer and rolling it smooth before adding the next. At the project's peak, crews were laying down about 353,000 cubic feet of concrete every day, enough to fill nearly 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools daily, setting world records at the time. Cooling pipes and careful temperature checks made sure the structure didn't overheat and crack as it hardened. By the time they finished, more than 265 million cubic feet of concrete had been packed and locked so tightly that the entire wall behaves like one giant block of stone. Turning the river aside was just as dramatic as building the dam itself. In December 2003, engineers closed the cofferdam and forced the Hongshui River into a temporary channel. That gave them a dry space to raise the main wall. 3 years later, they began filling the reservoir, letting the water climb hundreds of feet behind the new barrier. The dam's flood control system was built at the same time. 7 huge surface gates and 2 deep outlets that can safely release monsoon floods without shaking the structure. When the first major flood came, the spillways poured out walls of white water, and the dam didn't move an inch. Every part, from the sealed foundation to the stepped spillways that calm the flow, worked exactly as the designers had planned. The powerhouse at Longtan is hidden inside the mountain itself. Instead of building an exposed plant beside the river, workers blasted a massive underground cavern big enough to fit a cathedral. Inside it, they installed 9 gigantic turbines, each producing about 700 megawatts. Piece by piece, these machines were lowered, aligned, and assembled with laser precision. Rotors and stators, the size of small houses, sliding into place within millimeters. Between 2007 and 2009, each unit came online until the entire station reached its full strength. More than 6,400 megawatts of clean, steady power flowing across southern China. Even navigation was reimagined. The engineers planned a 2-stage ship lift, essentially a giant elevator for boats, to raise vessels nearly 600 feet around the dam. The system uses an intermediate channel between the lifts, allowing ships to climb the river in 2 steps. Construction of the navigation works took longer than the dam itself, with the first major lift opening in 2015 and additional improvements continuing after that. Altogether, Longtan cost about $4.2 billion to complete. Number 2. Yangqu Dam. High on the Qinghai Plateau, more than 8,800 feet above sea level, the Yellow River runs cold and clear through thin mountain air until it hits a wall of human design that makes it pause. This is the Yangqu Dam, a structure that looks like a mountain sculpted by engineers. Standing about 490 feet tall, it's built from layers of rock so tightly compacted they behave like a single solid mass. But unlike a solid concrete wall, Yangqu's face is covered with a smooth concrete skin that keeps the water sealed inside. This design, called a concrete face rock-filled dam, gives the structure flexibility. It can expand, contract, and even shift slightly with temperature and time without cracking or leaking. Building something this precise at high altitude was a balancing act. Crews layered rock in carefully measured lifts, packing each one down until the slopes behaved like armor. Filters of sand and gravel were added in between, ensuring that no small grains could move under pressure. Near the waterside, the builders prepared the bedrock like a surgical table, smoothing it and anchoring a reinforced plinth that would later hold the waterproof face slab. When the final concrete panels were installed, they fit against that foundation so cleanly that even as the reservoir rose, the face stayed bone dry, exactly as planned. Behind the wall, the real work begins. 3 giant Francis turbines, each producing about 400 megawatts, sit deep inside a powerhouse hollowed out of the rock. These turbines convert the height and pressure of the water into electricity so efficiently that together they deliver around 1,200 megawatts, enough to power millions of homes. Aligning the machinery took tolerances you'd expect in a jet engine, not in a mountain canyon. The first generator came online in November 2024, and by year's end, the full station was humming at capacity, a seamless handoff from construction to operation. The environment made every stage a test. Nights at this elevation drop below freezing, while days can bring sudden heat. Those temperature swings could easily crack fresh concrete, so engineers used low heat mixes and a slow, controlled curing process to keep stress in check. The face slab, spillways, and joints were monitored constantly, and sensors buried through the embankment tracked how the rockfill settled, shifted, and drained over time. Behind the dam now lies a shimmering mountain lake holding more than 1.3 million acre-feet of water. But Yangqu's impact stretches far beyond its valley. The dam connects directly to China's Qinghai-Henan ultra-high-voltage DC line, a power highway running nearly 985 miles eastward. This system sends clean hydropower straight from the plateau to factories and cities in central China with minimal loss, turning a remote gorge into part of a national energy network. The scale of that transformation shows up in its cost, roughly $2.5 billion. That figure includes not just concrete and turbines, but new roads, resettled communities, and grid infrastructure stretching across provinces. Number 1. Three Gorges Dam. The Yangtze River isn't just a river, it's a moving ocean, wide enough to swallow cities and powerful enough to tear through mountains. And yet, China found a way to stop it. What they built would become the largest dam on Earth, the Three Gorges Dam. Before the concrete, before the turbines, engineers had to pull off the unthinkable, turn off one of the planet's strongest rivers. They carved a huge bypass channel through the gorge and built temporary walls tall enough to steer the Yangtze like turning a valve. Then came the day that changed history. November 1997. Hundreds of trucks lined the banks, engines growling as they dumped rock and sand into the final open gap. Tens of thousands of people watched from the cliffs as the water frothed, twisted, and finally gave way. Within hours, the roar faded. The river that had run wild for millions of years went silent. That pause opened the stage for a creation beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. The finished wall would stretch more than 7,500 feet across and rise over 600 feet from the bedrock. It would swallow more than 35 million cubic yards of concrete, enough to fill 10,000 Olympic swimming pools. The price tag came to around 204 billion yuan, or roughly 30 to 32 billion US dollars at early 2000s rates. But that money didn't just build a dam. It built an entire system, power plants, ship locks, and a navigation network that would reshape central China forever. Inside that wall lies the heart of the project, the world's largest hydroelectric power station. 32 massive turbines, each producing about 700 megawatts, spin beneath the surface in cavernous halls carved straight from the rock. Together they generate 22,500 megawatts of power, more than any other station on the planet. Installing them was an engineering ballet on a scale never seen before. Towering cranes swung multi-story components into place, while teams aligned them with sub-millimeter precision. When the plant reached full operation in 2012, it was capable of producing up to 112 terawatt-hours of electricity in a single year, enough to light entire nations. But the Three Gorges wasn't just built for power, it changed how ships conquer the river itself. Engineers added twin ship locks, each a 5-step water staircase nearly 920 feet long and 115 feet wide. They can lift 10,000-ton vessels in about 4 hours, cutting transport costs across central China and linking inland cities directly to the coast. Then came an even greater marvel, the world's largest ship lift. Imagine a steel elevator taller than a 30-story building, able to raise 3,000-ton ships straight up more than 370 feet in one motion. Including counterweights, the mechanism weighs over 70 million pounds, and yet a full lift takes less than an hour. Even what you don't see is extraordinary. Deep below, engineers sealed cracks in the riverbed with grout curtains and carved underground turbine halls with surgical precision. Every hidden tunnel, chamber, and valve works together like the organs of a single living machine. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.